Hi everyone, this is Heather Thompson, Clarity Life Coach, author, and speaker. And I'm coming to you today. I won't be on video. This will be an audio only message, so treat it like a podcast. But this particular message is related to what's going on with the coronavirus epidemic or the pandemic that we're experiencing worldwide, especially hard in the United States right now. I understand that we have the strongest number of cases as of today, April 1st, at the recording of this message. And in addition to the pandemic, we're now dealing with the financial crisis. Millions now unemployed or underemployed, and there doesn't seem to be an immediate end in sight. However, I've not lost faith, and I don't want you to either, because I have a word to share with you based on a prophetic word and some life coaching lessons that I want to share now. So, for a little bit of backstory first, for the last several months, I've looked at the clock at random chimes, just particularly noticing what time it was, and it would stick out to me that it was always a repeated time, 2:22, 3:33, and so on. But there's two other numbers that I've seen quite a bit. It would either be 11:23 or 11:41. And since the pandemic happened, I noticed this happening in rapid succession. I thought, okay, Lord, I'm not into numerology or into studying certain things like that a lot at all, but I do know a pattern when I see one. And I want to share what the Lord shared with me when I specifically prayed and asked for more insight on this. I got a message quickly. Mark 11:23 in the New International Version reads, "Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them." John 11:41 says, "So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, 'Father, I thank you that you have heard me.'" When I read those two together, I was immediately encouraged. That's Mark 11:23 and John chapter 11, verse 41. When I read that together, I got so encouraged because the first message, what Jesus was teaching his disciples and letting them know, truly, if I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. And some early manuscripts apparently say, "If you have faith in God," Jesus answered, that if you have faith in God, this will indeed be done for you. And that is so encouraging to me because right now we are hearing reports daily of new people coming down with the coronavirus, new people being on life support, of dying, numbers by the hundreds of deaths, and thousands coming out of different countries. And it is absolutely frightening in one respect to see this, and it's disheartening. It's heartbreaking to hear this for the people who are mourning their loved ones. And it's definitely a time that people feel a lot of despair. It's triggering feelings of depression and anxiety. But I want to remind you, the news cannot be your final say right now. I'm not asking you to turn away from common sense. Absolutely not. You won't get that from me. But I am asking you to remember who you are, and in terms of your relationship with God, whose you are. This time is not going to be easily come out of for a lot of people without faith. I can't tell you what to believe, but I can share with you what I do believe and the message that's been impressed upon my heart. Being lost in despair is not the way to get through this time. For a lot of you, you have come through many seasons of hard trials. You haven't felt very celebratory. You didn't particularly care that it was 2020 as long as God was bringing you another story. And some of you were thinking, here this comes. I don't know how to deal with it. Well, that's where John 11 comes in right after Mark 11:23, because this particular chapter in John 11, when you put the two together, there is a section right as we're coming to that particular verse of 41, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. He hears the news as he is speaking with the people and preaching the gospel, that indeed Lazarus has passed away. And he tells them, this is going to be well. Our friend Lazarus, as he says in verse 11, has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. Do you know how insane that sounds? That's how some of you are sounding to some of your friends right now, because you're relying on your faith. You don't have any problem with Mark 11 and 23, do you? You already know that you have the faith to tell a situation, get out of here. This isn't for me. My marriage is not going to fall apart. My child is going to get better. I am not going to lose my job permanently. And if this job falls away, I'm going to get another one. Matter of fact, I'm going to be able to start my business. All this trouble, go ahead, get away from me. Go back to hell from whence you came. The Lord is with me. And because he's with me, I've got this. That's what you're saying. So you sound, you've got that Mark 11:23 faith. But when it comes to John chapter 11, and you're saying just as Jesus did, you know what? The situation has fallen asleep for me. Right now, things look a little bleak, but that's okay, because very soon it's going to wake up. It might take 2 weeks. It might take 2 months. It might take 5. But guess what? I'm going to come out on the other side. This situation, that even though it's sleep right now, even though it looks dead to y'all, it's going to wake up. And you know what it is to have that kind of faith, but people think that you are insane. Just as most likely Martha did, and the sisters of Lazarus did, saying, wait a minute, that's not the case. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, which is exactly what Martha tells Jesus in John chapter 11, verse 21. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. You have most likely at least one person in your corner saying, you know what? You could have done this a different way. And had you done that, your marriage wouldn't have failed. You wouldn't be in this situation right now. You would, if you had just gone back to school and got that additional degree, maybe you wouldn't have lost your job. Maybe if you would have tried to start your business earlier, you wouldn't be in this failing position. But guess what? You know what? I still love you. I love the Lord. And if nothing else, I'm going to say, you know what? He's going to give you what you ask, because I know you got faith. When you have that one friend, even if you don't, be that one friend to yourself. Know that the Holy Spirit is on your side. Know that Jesus is that he is with you. You have got intercession in the heavenly realms for you. This is your time to rise up and understand you don't need to hide your faith. You need to have that out as the most beautiful flag that you can, letting yourself know, because we have to remind ourselves who we are. And that God is with us, that he is for us. You use those promises and you stand on them. And sometimes, guess what? In some seasons, you have to stretch out and lay on those promises and say, you know what? My God said that he would never leave me nor forsake me. I have never seen the righteous forsaken, and I am, despite my faults, one of his righteous children. I'm going to come out of this on the other side, and I'm going to be more than okay. It's going to be excellent. I'm a champion. You have to remind yourself, if it sounds corny or strange, anything, you have to stand on that word. So again, this is where John 11:41 comes in. Because after all of this, after people thinking Jesus is crazy, after his disciples misunderstanding him, he goes to see Lazarus, who is in his tomb, by the way. And he tells people, take away the stone in verse 39. And they say, but by this time, there's going to be a bad odor. He's been there for 4 days, a dead man for 4 days. Who is expecting him to come back? A situation that seems long dead in your life right now, who is expecting it to come back? But if you have the faith as Jesus did, even when it looks as bleak as this was, but Jesus says to his disciples, as much as he's telling us today, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And so in verse 41, it says, so they took away the stone. They probably doubted him, but they took away the stone because they were following the authority that Jesus carried and honored his request. And then Jesus looks up and says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And in verse 42, he goes beyond that and says, I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. See, there are people who need to see you in your situation. I know you've heard this from pastors before. People who need to see you looking like you are on your last leg. Maybe they need to see you without that last leg. sitting down in your situation, not quite knowing what's going to happen. But you need to have the faith to say, no matter what this looks like, I don't care what grave you tried to put me in, I'm coming out alive. My business is coming out alive. I may have to pivot or I may have to pause. But either way, whatever strategy I have to implement now, my marriage, this business, the health of my child, my own particular health, the situation in my family, the situation on my job, the economy, dealing with the coronavirus, whatever the case is, I am coming out alive. And that's precisely what happened. Lazarus, after Jesus called him in a loud voice and said, Lazarus, come out. Some verses say, come forth. He came out. And then comes the most important part. After, of course, I'd say that we have to remember Jesus said to the people around Lazarus, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Once you come out of your situation, you got to take off the grave clothes. You got to take off whatever you wrap that situation as, your doubt, your fear, your unbelief, your unwillingness to see another way, your hard-heartedness, your anger, whatever is keeping you, whatever is keeping that from being better. Take off the grave clothes and let it go. And that's another thing to remember in this time. While you're expecting to speak to mountains, as in Mark 11:23, and to see them move because you're operating in faith. And while you're telling the Lord, as Jesus did in John chapter 11, verse 41, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And looking up to heaven with your faith, make sure that you're repenting right now. Make sure that you're going before God. This is truly a practical step. Making sure that you're going before God and saying, Father, I repent of my sins. Those things that I know of, those things that I don't know of, any damage that I may have done, anything I may have caused between the two of us, anything I may have done within my family, anything I did to myself. Because we can be some of the greatest harm in our lives to ourselves. I want to remind you, repent. Leave, and when you do, take off the grave clothes and let it go. Don't return to it. Don't keep saying, oh, I wish I didn't do this. Oh, if only, if only, if only. Hindsight, we say, is 20/20, but that really only comes with vision and knowledge and the ability and the willingness to see something different, to be able to judge the situation without looking at it through rose-colored lenses and saying, this is precisely where I went wrong. This is where things got off track. Well, you can get back on track today. I want you to remember the combination of those two things and the purpose of this. That when I asked God, what is the title of this? I should have said it earlier. But it is label your season. Label your season. You've got to speak to the expectancy of what it is that you're looking for right now. When you go before God and ask him, what am I supposed to come out of this season with? All this calamity going on, this chaos, both financially and biologically in the world. What am I supposed to do? Once you know, I want you to start labeling things. This particular time, what are you expecting to come out of? What are you expecting to see differently? What will you define it as? This is my season of this. This is my time for that. Oh, that's an answer between you and God. I'm not in the middle of it, but I'm encouraging you to walk towards that and make your decision today. And when I say label, a lot of people look at that. It can have a negative connotation to it. But there are other synonyms, other ways to say label that I mean here. Identify, market, classify, characterize. You've got to be able to label, to identify this particular season the right way. You've got to be able to mark it off so that when you come back to it, you can see the lessons that you learned. You've got to be able to classify it and say, this is what the purpose of this time is for as God gives it to you so that you don't mislabel it. And you've got to characterize it. You've got to understand, who are you now? Because too often we are playing a role like a character in seasons in our life based on the way people mislabeled us in the past. So now it is your time. If you're going to be casting things out of your life, sending them, saying, get away from me, this has nothing to do with me, I am going to move everything in the way of what I am doing now and what God has called me to do. I'm going to tell these situations as in Mark 11:23 to get out of the way. And in John 11:41, I'm going to look up to God and say, Father, I thank you that you've heard me when it is all over, because you have to know who to give the glory. If you don't know, that's where the arrogance comes in. That's where you think I did this all by yourself and start going through all these Deuteronomy level curses where you see yourself going through a hell that God never intended. Label your season, and I promise you, it will elevate your life. You'll be a blessing to many like never before. And isn't that the purpose of why we're here? Once we find our way, we show others the way. And we do it through using the gifts and talents that God gave us. And that starts right now by properly labeling your season. So God bless you. Again, Heather Thompson, Clarity Life Coach, author, and speaker. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back as soon as I have a new word. I appreciate your time, and all my information for reaching me is below in the description box. And I appreciate your comments and feedback and for sharing this with others. And as I always say at the closing of my messages, of course, God bless you. And know this, that if you're not having a great day, make it one. It is within your power to do so. Take care and be well.